The desert wind howled, carrying stinging grains of sand that pelted our faces and equipment. I squinted against the onslaught, my eyes fixed on the looming silhouette of the Great Pyramid. Even after weeks of working at its base, its sheer enormity still took my breath away. "Dr. Hartley!" a voice called out, barely audible over the wind. I turned to see my research assistant Nadia jogging towards me, her hijab whipping around her face. "We've found something!" My heart quickened. We'd been excavating a newly discovered chamber near the base of the pyramid, and every day brought new mysteries. I followed Nadia to the excavation site, where our team huddled around a small opening in the limestone. "What is it?" I asked, kneeling to peer into the darkness. Dr. Ahmed, our Egyptian liaison, handed me a flashlight. "See for yourself, Sarah." I shone the light into the opening, and my breath caught in my throat. The beam illuminated a narrow passageway, its walls adorned with intricate hieroglyphs unlike any I'd seen before. They seemed to shimmer and dance in the flickering light, almost as if they were alive. "My God," I whispered. "This could change everything we know about the Old Kingdom." "Or confirm what we've always suspected," Ahmed said cryptically. I glanced at him, but his expression was unreadable. We spent the next few hours widening the opening, careful not to damage the surrounding structure. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the Giza plateau, we finally created an entrance large enough for a person to squeeze through. "We should wait until morning," Nadia suggested, eyeing the darkening sky nervously. I shook my head. "We can't risk anyone else discovering this before us. We go now." Ahmed nodded in agreement, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "I'll go first." We watched as Ahmed wriggled through the opening, his flashlight beam dancing across the ancient walls. Nadia and I followed, the cool air of the passageway a stark contrast to the desert heat. The tunnel stretched before us, sloping gently downward. The walls were covered in those strange hieroglyphs, depicting scenes I couldn't quite make sense of. Human figures with animal heads, bizarre rituals, and what looked like portals. "This doesn't make sense," Nadia muttered, running her hand along the wall. "These symbols, they're not from any known period of Egyptian history. Perhaps we've discovered a new dynasty," I suggested, though even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. These carvings felt wrong, somehow. Alien. We continued deeper into the passage, the air growing thicker and mustier with each step. After what felt like hours, we emerged into a large chamber. Our flashlights barely penetrated the inky darkness. "Look," Ahmed said, pointing to the center of the room. There, atop a raised dais, sat a black sarcophagus. It was unadorned save for a single line of hieroglyphs running along its edge. "The gateway opens for those who speak the words of Anubis," Ahmed translated, his voice hushed. I approached the sarcophagus, drawn by an inexplicable urge to touch it. As my fingers brushed the smooth obsidian surface, a jolt of energy surged through my body. I yanked my hand back with a gasp. "Sarah?" Nadia's voice was tinged with concern. "Are you all right?" I nodded, unable to speak. My mind was reeling, filled with images I couldn't comprehend. Vast cosmic voids, writhing tentacles, and eyes. So many eyes. "We should open it," Ahmed said, already moving to push the lid. "Wait!" I cried, but it was too late. With a grinding sound, the lid slid away, revealing nothing. The sarcophagus was empty. For a moment, we stood in stunned silence. Then a low rumble filled the chamber. The ground beneath our feet began to tremble. "We need to get out of here," Nadia said, panic rising in her voice. We turned to flee, but the entrance to the chamber had vanished, replaced by a solid wall of hieroglyphs. As we watched in horror, the symbols began to move, rearranging themselves into new patterns. "What's happening?" I shouted over the growing rumble. Ahmed's eyes were wide with terror. "The gateway," he whispered. "It's opening." The air in the chamber grew thick and heavy, pressing against us like a physical force. A high-pitched whine filled my ears, and I felt my vision begin to blur. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was a swirling vortex of darkness emerging from the sarcophagus. I awoke to the sound of dripping water. My head throbbed, and every muscle in my body ached. I blinked, trying to focus in the dim light. I was lying on a cold stone floor surrounded by ancient pillars that stretched up into darkness. "Nadia, Ahmed," I called out, my voice echoing in the vast space. "Over here," came Nadia's weak reply. I crawled towards her voice, finding her huddled against one of the pillars. Her hijab was gone, and a nasty gash ran along her forehead. "Are you okay?" I asked, helping her sit up. She nodded, wincing. "I think so. Where are we?" I looked around, trying to make sense of our surroundings. We seemed to be in some sort of underground temple, far larger than any I'd ever seen or read about. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something alien and wrong. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to find Ahmed and get out of here." We stumbled to our feet, using the pillars for support. As our eyes adjusted to the gloom, I realized the walls were covered in the same strange hieroglyphs we'd seen in the passageway. But here they seemed to pulse with an inner light, casting eerie shadows that danced and writhed. "Sarah," Nadia whispered, pointing. "Look." I followed her gaze and felt my blood run cold. In the center of the chamber stood a massive statue of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead. But this was no ordinary representation. The statue's eyes glowed with an unnatural green light, and its mouth was open in a silent howl. At its feet lay Ahmed, unmoving. We rushed to him, praying he was still alive. As I reached out to check for a pulse, his eyes snapped open. But they weren't Ahmed's eyes anymore. They were solid black, reflecting our terrified faces like dark mirrors. "The gateway is open," Ahmed said, his voice a guttural growl that didn't sound human. "The old ones will return." I scrambled backward, pulling Nadia with me. Ahmed, or whatever was wearing Ahmed's skin, stood up, movements jerky and unnatural. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What gateway? What old ones?" Ahmed's face split into a grin that was far too wide, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. "The truth of the pyramids," he hissed. "They were never tombs. They were prisons, holding back the darkness between the stars. And now, after millennia, the seals are breaking." Nadia grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "We need to run. Now." We turned and fled, our footsteps echoing through the vast chamber. Behind us I heard Ahmed's inhuman laughter, followed by the sound of stone grinding against stone. I dared a glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The statue of Anubis was moving, its massive head turning to follow our retreat. We ran blindly through dark corridors, the walls pulsing with that sickly green light. The hieroglyphs seemed to reach out for us, trying to snag our clothes and hair. All around us, I could hear whispers in a language that hurt my ears and made my head spin. "There!" Nadia shouted, pointing to a narrow opening ahead. We squeezed through, emerging into another large chamber. This one was dominated by a massive stone tablet covered in more of those strange symbols. "It's some kind of map," I realized, studying the carvings. "Look, there's the Giza Plateau and... oh my god." The tablet showed a network of tunnels and chambers stretching far beyond the known extent of the pyramids. It depicted a vast underground complex that spread beneath the entire Giza necropolis and beyond. "This is impossible," Nadia whispered. "How could something like this have remained hidden for so long?" Before I could respond, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the chamber. The knot Ahmed had found us, and it wasn't alone. I could hear the click of claws on stone growing closer by the second. "We need to find a way out," I said, scanning the room desperately. That's when I noticed a small alcove partially hidden behind a fallen pillar. "There!" We raced to the alcove, squeezing inside just as the creatures burst into the chamber. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find us. Through a small gap, I could see them, twisted, jackal-headed monstrosities that moved with a terrible grace. Ahmed's body was among them, but it was changing, limbs elongating and fur sprouting from his skin. The creatures sniffed the air, their glowing eyes sweeping the room. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought they'd discovered us. But then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they left, bounding off down another corridor. We waited several minutes before daring to emerge from our hiding spot. The chamber was empty once more, but the air felt charged, as if a storm was brewing underground. "What do we do now?" Nadia asked, her voice trembling. I turned back to the stone tablet, my mind racing. "We need to seal the gateway," I said. Whatever that thing opened, we have to close it." Nadia nodded, her face set with determination despite her fear. "How?" I studied the tablet more closely, tracing the network of tunnels with my finger. "There," I said, pointing to a chamber at the heart of the complex. "That has to be where the gateway is. If we can get there, maybe we can figure out how to close it." It was a long shot, but it was all we had. We set off through the twisting corridors, using the mental map I'd formed from the tablet to guide us. Every shadow made us jump, every distant sound sent our hearts racing. But somehow, miraculously, we managed to avoid the creatures. After what felt like hours, we emerged into a vast circular chamber. At its center stood a ring of obsidian obelisks, each carved with those maddening hieroglyphs. Between them, the air shimmered and warped, as if reality itself was coming apart at the seams. "The gateway," I breathed. As we approached, I could feel an otherworldly pull, as if something on the other side was trying to draw us in. Through the shimmering veil, I caught glimpses of impossible geometries and vast alien landscapes that hurt my eyes to look at. "How do we close it?" Nadia asked, her voice barely audible over the low hum emanating from the gateway. I circled the obelisks, searching for any clue. That's when I noticed small indentations at the base of each one, roughly the size and shape of a human hand. "Here," I said, placing my hand in one of the indentations. Immediately, the obelisk began to glow with a soft blue light. "Nadia, quick! Put your hands on the others." She did as I instructed, and soon all but one of the obelisks were glowing. The gateway began to flicker and waver. "It's working!" Nadia cried, but our victory was short-lived. A furious roar echoed through the chamber, and I turned to see the jackal-headed creatures pouring in from every entrance. Leading them was the thing that had once been Ahmed, now fully transformed into a monstrous hybrid of man and beast. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it growled, stalking towards us. "The old ones will reclaim this world and all others." I stood my ground, keeping my hand firmly on the obelisk. "Nadia, don't let go," I shouted. The creatures circled us, snarling and snapping. I could feel their hot breath on my skin, see the hunger in their glowing eyes. But still, I didn't move. "You are nothing," the Ahmed thing hissed. "Insignificant specks in the face of cosmic truth. Why resist?" "Because it's our world," I spat back, "and we won't let you have it." With a roar of fury, it lunged at me. I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact, but it never came. Instead, I heard a familiar voice cry out, "No!" My eyes snapped open to see Dr. Imad, our dig supervisor, standing in the entrance to the chamber. He raced forward, evading the creatures with surprising agility, and slammed his hand onto the final obelisk. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The gateway collapsed in on itself with a deafening roar. The jackal creatures howled in agony as they were pulled towards the imploding portal. I watched in horror as the Ahmed thing was lifted off its feet, its body stretching and distorting as it was sucked into the void. "Hold on!" Dr. Imad shouted over the chaos. The pull of the collapsing gateway was immense. I gritted my teeth, every muscle straining to keep my hand pressed against the obelisk. Around us, the chamber was coming apart, huge chunks of stone ripping free and vanishing into the swirling vortex. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The gateway winked out of existence with a final thunderous boom that shook the entire complex. The silence that followed was deafening. Slowly, cautiously, we removed our hands from the obelisks. The glyphs carved into the black stone had changed, I noticed. They were simpler now, more like traditional Egyptian hieroglyphs. Is it over?" Nadia asked, her voice hoarse. Dr. Emad nodded, his face grim. For now, but we must leave quickly. This place is no longer stable. The journey back to the surface was a blur of collapsing tunnels and mad scrambles through narrow openings. By the time we emerged from the small entrance near the base of the Great Pyramid, the sun was rising over the Giza Plateau. We stood there, blinking in the harsh light, covered in dust and blood. Around us, the excavation site was a hive of activity as workers and other archaeologists rushed to secure equipment against the sudden instability of the ground. "Dr. Hartley," one of the junior researchers ran up to us. "Thank God you're all right. We've been searching for you all night. What happened down there?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. How could I possibly explain what we'd seen, what we'd experienced? Dr. Emad placed a hand on my shoulder. "There was a cave-in," he said smoothly. "We were trapped for a while, but managed to find another way out. It's fortunate no one was seriously hurt." The researcher nodded, accepting this explanation without question. "The whole area has become unstable," he reported. "We're shutting down the dig until further notice." As he hurried off to help with the evacuation, I turned to Dr. Emad. "How did you know?" I asked. "About the gateway, the obelisks, all of it." He sighed heavily, suddenly looking much older than his years. "There have always been those who knew the true purpose of the pyramids," he said quietly, "who understood the danger they contained. We've worked in secret for millennia to keep the seals intact, to prevent exactly what nearly happened last night." "But it's over now, right?" Nadia asked. "We closed the gateway." Dr. Imad's expression was grave. "For now," he repeated. "But the old ones are patient. They have waited eons for their chance to return. They will wait again." I shuddered, remembering the alien vistas I'd glimpsed through the gateway. "What do we do now?" "We watch," Dr. Emad said. "We guard, and we prepare, because one day they will try again." As if to punctuate his words, a low rumble shook the ground beneath our feet. In the distance, I saw a small fissure open in the sand, a thin wisp of that sickly green vapor curling up from its depths. Dr. Emad followed my gaze and frowned. "We should leave this place," he said quietly. "There's nothing more we can do here now." As we made our way back to the expedition's base camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide lurking horrors. Every gust of wind carried whispers in that maddening alien language. The next few days passed in debriefings, medical checkups, and tense, sleepless nights. The official story was that we'd discovered an unstable underground chamber that had subsequently collapsed, forcing us to abandon the dig. It was a neat, plausible explanation that neatly sidestepped the mind-bending reality of what we'd experienced. Nadia and I stuck close together, finding solace in each other's shared trauma. We'd seen things that defied explanation, faced horrors that threatened to shatter our sanity. The world felt different now, as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the terrifying truth that lurked just beneath the surface of reality. A week after the incident, as we were preparing to leave Egypt, Dr. Emad approached me in the hotel lobby. His face was drawn, his eyes haunted. "Dr. Hartley," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you. In private." We found a quiet corner of the hotel's garden, the Great Pyramid looming in the distance, a constant reminder of the secrets it held. "What is it?" I asked, dreading his response. Dr. Emad sighed heavily. "The seals are weakening," he said. "What we encountered, it was just the beginning. The old ones are stirring, and I fear we may not be able to hold them back much longer." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What can we do?" He handed me a small leather-bound book. Its cover was unmarked, but I could feel a strange energy emanating from it. "This contains knowledge passed down through generations of guardians," he explained. "Study it, learn from it, because when the time comes, we'll need every ally we can get." I took the book, its weight far greater than its size would suggest. "Why me?" I asked. Dr. Imad's eyes met mine, and in them I saw a mixture of hope and resignation. "Because you've seen the truth, and survived. Because you had the strength to close the gateway. And because, whether you like it or not, you're part of this now. As I packed that night, I carefully wrapped the book in a silk scarf and tucked it into the bottom of my suitcase. Part of me wanted to leave it behind, to walk away from the madness and try to forget everything I'd seen. But I knew that wasn't an option. The things we'd encountered in those dark tunnels beneath the pyramid weren't content to remain hidden any longer. The flight back to London was tense and quiet. Nadia sat beside me, her hand occasionally brushing against mine, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone in this. As we soared over the Mediterranean, I found myself staring out the window, half expecting to see tentacled horrors rising from the depths. "What do we do now?" Nadia asked softly as the plane began its descent into Heathrow. I thought of the book hidden in my luggage, of Dr. Emmad's warning, of the vast cosmic terror that threatened to engulf our world. "We prepare," I said, echoing Dr. Emmad's words, "and we stay vigilant." In the months that followed, life took on a surreal quality. By day, I taught classes and gave lectures, maintaining the facade of normality. But my nights were consumed by the study of that strange book, deciphering its cryptic texts and bizarre diagrams. Nadia and I spoke often, sharing our research and our fears. And always, I felt the weight of what we'd discovered pressing down on me. Every news report of unexplained phenomena, every whispered rumor of strange sightings in remote corners of the world sent a jolt of fear through me. Were these isolated incidents, or signs of something larger stirring? It was nearly a year after our fateful expedition when the dreams began. Vivid, terrifying visions of vast cosmic voids, of cities built at impossible angles, of creatures so alien and horrifying that my mind recoiled from their very existence. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, the echoes of otherworldly whispers still ringing in my ears. One particularly bad night, I fumbled for my phone and dialed Nadia's number without thinking. "Sarah?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" "I saw it again," I said, my voice shaking. "The gateway. But this time it was here, in London. And it was open." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Nadia spoke again, her voice was tight with fear. "I've been having dreams too," she admitted. "About Ahmed. About what he became. It keeps telling me that they're coming, that we can't stop them." I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of panic. "We need to talk to Dr. Emad," I said. "These dreams, I think they're more than just nightmares. I think they're warnings." "I'll book flights to Cairo," Nadia said, fully awake now. "We leave tomorrow." As I hung up the phone, my gaze fell on the leather-bound book sitting on my desk. Its presence seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurk just beyond our perception. I picked it up, intending to pack it for the trip, when a loose page fell out. It was a map, ancient and yellowed, showing a network of ley lines crisscrossing the globe. At each intersection point, a familiar symbol was drawn, the same symbol we'd seen on the sarcophagus in that first chamber beneath the pyramid. With trembling hands, I traced the lines, my finger coming to rest on a point just outside London. A point that corresponded exactly with the location I'd seen in my dream. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach as I realized the terrifying truth. The gateway wasn't just beneath Giza. There were others, scattered across the world, waiting to be opened, and somehow, impossibly, one of them was right here in England. As the first rays of dawn began to creep through my window, I stood there, the map clutched in my shaking hands, the weight of this new knowledge threatening to crush me. The old ones weren't just stirring in some distant, forgotten tomb. They were here, all around us, pushing against the thinning barriers between worlds, and we were running out of time to stop them. A soft chime from my phone broke me out of my spiraling thoughts. It was a text from Nadia. "Flights booked. We leave at noon. Pack light, but bring the book." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Whatever was coming, whatever cosmic horror was poised to break through into our reality, we would face it together. Armed with the knowledge from Dr. Ahmad's book and the strength we'd found in each other, we had to believe we stood a chance. As I began to pack, my eyes were drawn once more to the distant horizon, visible through my apartment window. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw a shimmer in the air, a twisting of reality that sent a jolt of recognition through me. Then it was gone, leaving me to wonder if it had ever been there at all. But deep down, in the part of me that had touched the gateway and survived, I knew the truth. The battle for our world had only just begun.